Thanks, Stephanie. Good morning, everyone. As Stephanie mentioned, my name is Bill Pugh, Managing Partner for Smart Connections Consulting, and I'm happy to be here with this distinguished panel. Hopefully, we're going to talk about some things that'll inspire some questions and thought as everyone is approaching their own set of initiatives within their cities. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by asking each one of the panelists to introduce themselves, and then we'll jump into the panel questions.
Okay, I'm Keith Robinson of the City of Atlanta, Mayor's Office of Innovation and Performance.
I'm Tony Batalla. I'm the head of IT for the City of San Leandro, which is just south of Oakland in the San Francisco Bay Area.
My name's Chris Chiancone. I'm the Chief Information Officer for the City of Plano.
Thank you. So, I work with a number of cities, and one of the things that I've always kind of discovered each time that I'm talking to them is that, one, no two cities are alike. So and this is a general question for all of you, what are your top three initiatives within your cities and the areas that you work?
I think that every city needs to define what it is that they want. And I think that's one of our top initiatives, trying to define what is smart cities to us and our environment. We just went through a whole process where we brought in every agency or every department within our agency to start talking about what does it mean? How do we start erasing those lines of delineation? How do we start erasing those borders between departments and the handoffs, both of workflow and business process and technology to one another? So I think that the definition and defining it to the culture of the organization for us is probably the top initiative that we're working on right now. The other one is traffic. Everybody, or at least many people, are experiencing traffic issues. So, we have partnered with Waze, and we do bi-directional Waze integration through our GIS systems for traffic. So that is a kind of another one. And then I would have to say that the third one would be probably anything that revolves around making public safety more efficient. I would have to say, there's a strong push for, ways to make the community safer using some of the smart technology. And for us, I think that's probably our top three.
And I think for us, in the city of Atlanta, there's similar to what he's facing as well. I think the number one thing is we have like one Atlanta breaking across a lot of the different silos within the city. I think that's one of the challenges that we've seen when talking about smart cities, but not just breaking the boundaries within the city, within the city government, but across the whole ecosystem within the city. So I think that's one thing that we're looking at. The other thing that we're looking at as well, too, is, making data more transparent and more accurate and actually cleaning up the data. Some of the discussions that I heard last night was, trusting some of the data that we get. So we're actually cleansing some of that data, but we're also gathering some of that data from the source, so we're able to evaluate it in real time. So those are two key initiatives for us as well, too. And the third one, obviously, is traffic. Atlanta has a huge traffic issue. So we're looking at, different solutions to actually help with traffic. So those are some of the key three areas that we're focusing on.
And I'll just echo what my colleagues here have said. In San Leandro, our city council just adopted a fiber optic master plan and smart city strategy, which was a years-long strategic planning effort to identify what are the initiatives that we're most interested in, that we most want to apply technological solutions in the future, and that becomes a roadmap for us. But in the present, right now, one of the primary things, and this is not just for technology or innovation, but for the whole city, is we are facing some budget challenges. So that's probably the primary initiative, is to figure out how to reduce our costs or make more money and find new revenue. And a second one is, in line with the video we just saw, this shift that we see with wireless from big macro towers up in the hills that traditionally cities don't have a lot of regulation or any interaction with, or we may have some on rooftops, on city facilities scattered throughout. But now everything's moving to the public right-of-way, and the battleground is our street poles, our street lights. And so we've got agreements, and we're negotiating with providers, directly to come up with master license agreements to access those poles. So that's a big initiative, and that's been another multi-year-long thing happening, and there's been a lot of stuff that's gone on I'm sure we can talk about later in that space. And the third one is digital inclusion, and that's this idea that all this investment we're making in technology, whether it's public Wi-Fi or broadband or fiber or anything, as I said, that we're also making sure that we're serving all the residents in our community. So 22% of San Leandrins don't have residential broadband at home. And that came out of our study. And that's a pretty significant number. I mean, that's a quarter of the people in our community don't have high-speed internet at home. So we want to make sure that we can deliver services that benefit them. So that we've got a few projects and a few partnerships in that arena that are really important to me. So those are the three big things: our fiber master plan, small cell agreements, digital inclusion.
Perfect. Now, I mean, I spend a lot of time talking to folks like yourself in the cities and trying to get things going. And I think the smart cities holds a tremendous promise. And it's great in terms of looking at a solution and kind of saying, okay, we're gonna solve a number of issues, a number of problems, gonna make things better. Can you talk about one project that you have right now going on and what the challenges have been?
Well, I'll throw a project out there, that we've done in the past. Obviously, one of the key challenges when you talk about smart cities is getting people to talk together and actually getting the right decision makers in the room. What we found out is we did an agreement with IBM, AT&T. Then we also went out to the private sector where we had companies like UPS, and some of the other companies in the city, and then some of these state folks as well. We came up with kind of a platform, with Together Safer Roads, to develop a platform that helps with traffic and stuff. And before we developed the platform, what we did was we went to each of the individual departments to get their actual feedback into this platform, into the development of the platform. So it's not one silo developing this platform. So the feedback that we've received from internally from the city, then also from UPS and everyone else, we're able to develop this, real innovative type project. And what we really came out of is we've got this phenomenal project, but the key that we found out is when you have interaction and that stuff and you're focusing on an actual problem to solve versus, hey, I've got this real cool solution or I've got this cool product, you're actually focused on the actual problem. That's where we find the innovation takes place. But we also find out that's when you actually start to solve the problem, but you also add, value to the project as well, too. So you've got internal buy-in from everyone and also within the community as well.
Great.
Yeah, a lot of times it's easy to focus on the solution.
Yeah.
And not think about the problem. I mean, as problem solvers, our first thing to do is give me a problem, I'm going to try to come up with a solution. And I think Keith's right. You got to step back first a lot and say, wait, what are we trying to solve? And that you see that all the time in projects. In San Leandro, I'll give you an example. So we have an IoT project. This is a citywide smart streetlight network. So we converted all of the streetlights to LED lights. That alone will generate some $8 million of savings over the next 15 years. The project, at the same time, we attached, smart nodes to all the lights, so now they can be controlled remotely from a server. Engineers can get text alerts if a light's going out. You can change the, follow the sun policies and all kinds of stuff like that. So it's a smart light. But what we found, which is not unusual, is that it's kind of happening in, Public Works is doing its thing and then saying, oh, wait, it seems like there's some technology component to this. Let's get IT over here to talk about it. And we said, well, we didn't know you were doing it. Let's see, well, we could do other stuff with that. Maybe we could, have you thought about security with that? Like, maybe we should see if we can put some, test some of the vulnerabilities on these devices. So that all happens kind of like the way you would expect, which is only until you're in there, doing it and recognizing it. And of course, the ideal is that we all come together, come up with this project and outline all this stuff up front. But that's okay. I mean, that's the way we tend to do things. But the challenge is that, now we're rolling this out, we're deploying it, and figuring out kind of on the fly even what's the role of IT? What's the role of Public Works and OT, and where do the lines end and begin, and how are we comfortable with that? IT, is letting Public Works staff take over some of the management of the lights, but at the same time, they're like, well, we still want you to have access and be administrators in the system because, we need technical expertise. So this is a new world, and that comes with it, a lot of challenges like that, and I think defining kind of these operational roles is really critical, but it's not easy. But I think about it a lot. It keeps me up at night.
Well, I think that the panel has hit on a couple of things that we're all feeling. Number one is it's completely individualistic to our environment. To each individual agency, smart cities has got a different definition. Being in municipal government for the last 25 years or so, on and off, I've found in my career that the handoff between department to department seems to be a barrier to many operational issues. Not necessarily the department not understanding how things work, but the handoff from one division to the other becomes the issue. So when we started this approach, we were able to identify, man, if the departments can't work together systemically, heart, lungs, work together as one unit, how are the different agencies within that community going to work together? That video that we just watched, which was fantastic, pointed that out. In our environment, in our city, that technology would cross maybe 8 to 10 different agencies. So how do you get all those agencies to talk to one another, let alone the departments in each one of those agencies, the department in your agency, and then, by the way, sell it up and down with everything that's moving in the organization? So I think that, those are some of the challenges that we're feeling. So what we did is we decided to take a stance and kind of stop a little bit on the smart cities approach to some extent, where we do some of the, I would say, sprinkling of technology around, like putting the LTE in the traffic lights, and we have a couple IoT sensors as partnerships with the Plano Independent School District. But what our approach is we're taking a data-first approach. You got to get your data analytics into place before you could move forward with any type of IoT technology. If not, you're hanging a $400 a year keyboard on each light pole, in my opinion. And I think that by getting that data-first approach, you'll be able to better understand first what's the end in mind, right? What is your final state? And number two, be able to build out your IoT or your smart city network more effectively, because your data is kind of driving what your needs are. And I think that's kind of the approach that we're taking in our environment.
Yeah, and I want to, you touched on something, Chris, that I think is really important when we talk about smart cities, and that's that the problems that cities face and that they're trying to solve, like transportation or housing or air pollution, these are regional problems. They're not confined to one city or the political boundaries of a defined area. They're regional problems, and they need regional thinking and regional approaches. And your question about how to get interagencies to work together is a really, really vexing one, but a really, really critical one. We did that as part of our fiber master plan. We brought in BART, which is the Metro, Bay Area Rapid Transit. We brought in Caltrans, PG&E, which is the utility, and lots of neighboring cities. And it was a really good meeting in that everybody showed up, at least. I was happy to see some of the state agencies, at least they came. But driving that forward to actually working together is a whole other story. And one example is AC Transit. They're the transportation authority for the East Bay, Alameda County, Contra Costa County. They're doing a smart corridor in our city, which is great. But they have their own transportation management system. They don't have the same ATMS that we do. And so in order for this to work in our city, we had to install their equipment and their servers. So now we have 2 ATMS systems running in the city of San, and our transportation engineers have to manage 2 systems. As any technologist would say, that's probably not ideal. It's not the end of the world because it works. It's transparent to the user. But on the back end, you kind of see that inefficiency. And if we had been able to come together at some point and agree on a standardized platform, you'd be able to roll that out region-wide without saying, oh, by the way, you have to install a server, and oh, by the way, your IT department needs to manage this thing because we don't have any resources for that. All right, I mean, we'll do it because I think, to the other point you made, being collaborative is the most important thing. If we're not collaborative, none of this happens. Being flexible, but having that kind of regional thought planning, I don't know how that takes shape or place, but it needs to happen in order to really realize the true benefits of a smart city or smart region.
I think that, most citizens love the green wave. And if you don't know what the green wave is if you've ever been late to work and you got all green lights and you got there in time, that's a green wave. What I'm nervous about is that one community is going to do that, and then all of a sudden you're going to be driving down a road that maybe another city manages and you're going to hit all red lights, and then the next city is going to have traffic preemption, and then you're going to get green lights. And I think that if we were to represent kind of just very simplistically what some of the challenges are, it's right there. You have one city that's investing time, money, and resources into getting their technology for traffic preemption or traffic management in alignment, but then all of a sudden you hit another city that's not there yet, and then you go to another one, it is there, and you know what? Yes, not every light is going to be red, green, red, green, red, green anymore, but then you're going to have all green, red, 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 all green again, and I think that's what, I think that's going to be a risk if we don't get this collaboration and these handoffs to these different agencies with one another, or at least standardize and get the participation available to those other agencies.
Exactly, and that leads me to another question. So, I mean, I think we've heard that there's challenges, and it's not just intra-city, it's regional. So, I mean, what we did in Palo Alto, others heard about, and they were like, okay, come to my city and do that. And I found the same thing. Yeah. So if I go from San Jose to Palo Alto, my experience is going to be different as I approach Sunnyvale, as I approach Mountain View, all of these areas, it's going to be different. And we need consistency going across that. But how in the world do we address that?
Smart cities is not a technology problem.
Right.
It's a business problem. And it's a business workflow problem that technology could solve. But first you have to define what the business process is. And I think that's where people are missing this. We're technologists, like you said before. We will bring any solution you want to the table. Is it going to be meaningful, realistic, and effective? Maybe not if the original use case has not been defined. And I think that's what we need to do is get our leaders and different people in the community to come together, because it's not a technology issue. We solve it with technology. It is a business problem that needs to be solved.
And to your point, technology piece is the easiest piece that I find. I mean, it's really that political, will, which is the tough thing. I mean, I think that's where the rubber meets the road. So, solving those political challenges, I think that's where that discussion needs to take place, especially when you're looking at regional, and even you can even look at some of the stuff from a statewide standpoint as well, too. I mean, because, you may go from regional from a county, then et cetera, further out. So I think those are the tough questions to have, but I think getting some of the elected officials to understand some of these regional issues as we talk about, smart cities or regional issues, I think that is probably the key challenge in getting their buy-in, so.
And do you think that this, I mean, so you guys sit on that side of the fence, and then I'm sure that you get inundated by solution providers, we'll say solution providers, that want to help your cities become smart. But what I'm hearing is that there's a significant gap in terms of their understanding, they're leading with technology, and your understanding where you're wanting to solve the business problems. How do we bring those two together?
Stop calling. 100 calls a week on average. I mean, and everybody is IoT something. It makes it very hard to figure out who you're talking to anymore. Everybody's got a device. Everybody's got a platform. Bring a solution, right? Bring something that incorporates leadership, community, the different agencies within that area, and then bring the ideas up. The city of Boston, I think, did a phenomenal job with the RFP, if anybody hasn't seen it. The mayor started off with the first sentence was, if you're a smart city something, please stop calling us. Start responding to the RFP. We're looking for solutions, not products anymore.
I mean, that's the thing is like when we have a project, we put out an RFP or a proposal, and we'll come to you. We'll invite vendors or solution providers to come to us. One of the problems I think though with what you just described is that vendors, solution providers, got way out on the smart city thing and started defining smart city in marketing terms, and what it would mean and how we could connect all these things, and cities would be a platform and all this other stuff. And it's turned a lot of city people off. They just look at now, smart cities is almost like
you hate the name.
It's a hype term. And people immediately think this is just all BS. And I'm talking about my colleagues in other departments, public works director, finance director, I don't want to hear it. So that's kind of unfortunate because there is a lot of substance there. And I think we all recognize that the substance is there. But because of the way the landscape is, right now, with very little substance and tons of hype, we have our own internal marketing challenge to overcome to say, no, we can really make this valuable. But no, we're not there yet. And bringing the solution providers, I think one of the things that can happen and that we have done in San Leandro, and I recommend this as a model for other cities. In fact, we took it from San Francisco, which did with the startup in residence, is they invited solution providers, particularly startups in this case, to come work with city departments for free in an engagement with the understanding that they were developing a new solution for a defined city problem. The cities define their problems. And if that solution is really successful, there's a really good chance that they can sell it to the city next door and the next city next door. And the smart city market suddenly looks like this really attractive market. You've got venture capital moving in. You've got startups who are GovTech startups. 10 years ago, no startup was going to be making government solutions. But now they are because there's a market there. And so recognizing that there's a market there and using that to incentivize solution providers to come work for you, we have a strategic partnership with a startup that came out of that, and we're working on data analytics programs and things like that. We call it CityGraph. But that's because they recognize there's a huge market potential, and they're willing to come, innovate with us at a very low risk, low cost to us. And that's one of the things is, frankly, cities don't have a lot of money, we're broke. And so we need to think about creative ways to engage solution providers, but they also need to recognize that it can't be just a purely transactional thing. You can't just knock on my door and say, oh, I've got the new $50,000 widget for you. You've got to bring something more, some more of a partnership, more skin in the game. And that's what I'm looking for when I'm looking at solution providers is, do you got skin in the game? Do you care about these issues?
And I think the other issue is, too, understanding the business. I think there's always a big disconnect when we see solution providers, coming to the cities where, hey, this sounds like a great product, but it doesn't align with what each of those individual businesses are doing. Say, for example, something that Public Works is trying to accomplish or something that, public safety is trying to accomplish, and it's just this huge gap. So really understanding, that business part. And the other challenge, when you're knocking on the door a lot, there's ethic issues as well, too, that folks within city government get a little bit of concern about all the different vendors coming, knocking on the door. So if it does go off the RFP, who's been visiting the actual city itself. So that's why I think it's very important, to sometimes wait for the RFP, or if there's an RFI that may come out as well, to participate in some of those things as well. And I think also another thing that we haven't even touched on, maybe looking at some of the P3s where it's away from the city, where we're able to kind of test some of these interesting solutions and those type of things is something that should potentially be on the table as well too. But the key thing is, when you're knocking on the door on a regular basis, it just opens up the door to a lot of other different folks within the city where they're a little bit nervous from an ethics standpoint, so.
There's a good side to this, though.
Yeah.
I mean, there is, and I think part of it is from a STEM approach. So from an education approach, it seems like, we've seen this onslaught ever since the Raspberry Pi got introduced, right? So someone gets a Raspberry Pi and a temperature sensor, all of a sudden they got a smart device. And I think that we're seeing that advent happen, right? I think it's good for the people that want to get into the industry and they're learning this type of technology. But again, a lot of this stuff could be built from your own IT staff. We're looking, what we need to do, like we talked about before, is just that solution side or getting to the point where, we have that all-encompassing ecosystem for a smart city rather than components of a smart city.
Yeah, no, I think all of that is great. I've definitely experienced a lot of that in my efforts. But to your point, I think there is a lot of good. I think it holds a lot of promise. And as we mentioned yesterday, I think what's happening in San Diego is outstanding. That whole FRED program, I don't believe, has been publicized enough. There should be more, talk about some of the things that have been done that have garnered, savings that then go back into the community and do the community good. With that, we have about 10 minutes left, and so I'd like to open it up to questions from the audience. No questions?
So I think Chris mentioned that you don't want the companies just coming in, and another person mentioned that they'd rather work with startups. So I mean, for the companies who are already established, what would you like them to do if they're not to just sit and wait for an RFP? Because part of this is the education process. When they come in, they speak with you, they learn about your challenges, and then they can then create an offer, before the RFP comes up, because then you have to be ready to respond to that. So what would you propose to vendors who then, want to get in, work with you and want to get into the space and maybe can't just come in and do everything for free because there's a business side to it?
And I think, I don't know if I have an answer for you, but I could take you through kind of a scenario. The way typically procurement law works in a city is that if you, for instance, there is a concern which you touched upon, that if we want to do a smart city initiative and we have already talked to you, you could be excluded from the RFP process. So from a CIO approach, we're trying to protect you as a vendor. On the flip side to that, I think that we do need to be educated, right? But which one of the 500 companies that call a month is going to do it? And I think that that's where it gets really frustrating because you don't know who to talk to about what. Every device is similar and different in nature. It sounds like to me there maybe more of a round table or to integrate with some of the companies maybe that put this on where you would be able to do showcases about your technologies in a very vendor agnostic way. Because we're smart enough to figure out what technology is going to work for us, but the concept of it would be kind of interesting. Like some of the concepts up there, I was recording it, just so I could go back and research some of the things that Erickson was throwing out there, right? We hear the buzzwords, but we don't even know if they're right anymore. This industry is too infantile. This is we're in such an infantile state of smart cities right now. We're all trying to learn to try to get better at what we're doing. But for me, I think you guys are in a tough position because you're managing in that area. And I think maybe more roundtables that are agnostic in nature.
Well, I'll address vendors, and first and foremost, the vendors we work with, I consider partners. Like this is not, I don't like just be transactional. I don't like it to just be, okay, here's a service, did we hit that, here's the check. Most of the scopes that I write in my RFPs or even in my informal RFPs tend to shift a lot because we're, learning as we go and we're changing, and I like to have that flexibility. I don't like to write really prescriptive RFPs because then we end up with something that neither of us want, and so I try to keep it as flexible and loose and broad as possible. But I do empathize with vendors because I've never cold called. I mean, I actually have from the city side to try to get partnerships, but I can imagine how hard it is to just be cold call. Hey, what are your problems? Hey, I'm from so and so. Oh, we met here, and 99% of the time you don't get a response, or it's really hard, and so I try to be mindful of that and aware of that, and be considerate, treat vendors all equally with respect and dignity, and I hope the same. But what I will say can help is do your homework. We publish all our stuff online. Our smart city strategy is published. Everything we do is out in the open. Read it. It's 200 pages. It's good weekend reading. but read the executive summary, and you'll know what we're working on. And you can say, hey, I read your smart city strategy, and I see that transportation or digital inclusion are really important. We have a program for that, and I'd love to get a chance to show you about what we did in XYZ city. Now I'm interested, and maybe there's some procurement things there, but that's stuff we can always kind of work around. If we find a solution we're really interested in, we can figure out how to make it work. Once you get the CIO's buy-in, we'll go to bat for it. But just calling in and saying, hey, I've got an IoT thing, and let me talk to you, that's not going to get a call.
Well, I think you hit on something. It might not even get to us. I would imagine that 99% of the time, that call never comes to us, or that email never gets through to us. So it's not that we're being disrespectful and rude. There's so many that are calling right now about this, that they're being filtered right now because it's just the same speech over and over again.
I agree.
And I don't want to beat a dead horse, but we've all interviewed people, and at the end of the interview, you ask, do you have any questions of us? And the interviewee that stands out is the one who knows something about your business and says, can you tell me how my job will be impacted by whatever city strategy is going on? So I would echo exactly. If you call me and ask me what my challenges are, my challenge is dealing with you.
In this moment right now.
You go read what I'm doing.
Yeah.
You go, don't try to sell me what I've already got.
That's right.
Yeah.
Don't sell me something that is generic. Find out what I'm doing. It's all available on my website. And then tell me how you can make it better or fit in or fill a gap. But let's not start this conversation with my obligation now to educate you.
Yeah. And to answer your other question, I don't, of course, expect any vendor to work for us for free. Startups are willing to take that risk, and that's a different relationship. But with traditional vendors, I think there is something else you could bring to the table, though, whether it's some sort of partnership approach, some sort of additional piece, some sort of service value addition beyond just the transaction. And that's what I look for. That's what, I'm like, engages me.
And I think the other thing that we look for as well, too, because you got to remember there's no cookie cutter approach as well. So each city is completely different, and they're faced with different unique challenges. And just kind of having those discussions that speak to that particular city. So say, for example, whatever's going on in Seattle is completely different than what may be going on in Birmingham, Alabama, or something that's, in these different cities and stuff. So having those discussions are very important. Say, for example, some cities may outsource solid waste. Some cities may have solid waste, or have their own electric company or may not. So having some of those discussions, there may be different social issues that impact cities as well too. So that may be on top of mind of a mayor's administration. So maybe tying some of those solutions into that as well too. I think those are very critical and key.
Yeah, like I mentioned, digital inclusion. You can come in and say, hey, we'll do this project, and we'll also maybe light up, a low-income housing development in your community and make sure that they have connectivity. That's something a vendor could maybe offer. They're not going to make any money on that. It'll eat into their profit a little bit, but it's a community benefit. And the more I work in city government, the more I recognize that it's not always about dollars for us. It's a lot about community public benefits. And if we can justify a public benefit, that will help it move a project forward. So that's just another thing to keep in mind. We care about the community. If you care too, we're more likely going to want to work with you.
Any other questions? Well, great. Thanks, guys. And I'm going to take to the stage and give a round of applause for our speakers.